got a bunch that's a little bit different.
How would you feel if from your earliest memory you were bounced from home to home and in and out of hospitals because of very severe digestive problems, because of very severe ADHD problems? That's the lifestyle that Allison Rose-Mannall lived when she was a young girl. And she found a way to take her problems and her pain and turn it around and start to help other people. In fact, she is making a difference with single mothers all over the world. So I can't wait for you to hear the life that this unbeatable woman, Allison Rose-Mannall, has gone through. Here it is. Check out this episode.
These stories of triumph over adversity will help you handle your toughest days in life and become unbeatable.
Hey, Allison, welcome to the Unbeatable podcast. Thank you for being my guest today.
Amazing. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, I have been reading up about you and about your story, and man, I am impressed. A mother that has gone through the kind of pain and tragedy that you've gone through, a young girl that's gone through what you went through growing up, and then has become successful and actually been able to prove all the experts wrong. Man, I can't wait to get into your story on this episode.
Thank you. Yes, it's certainly been a journey.
You just released your first book. We're going to talk about Aurora Chronicles in just a few minutes, but getting to the point of putting a book in print is a massive endeavor. I even did an entire episode with a friend of mine who is a very accomplished publisher and an author of many books. And he and I both said, like, this is a mountain of work in front of you for anybody, but especially for a girl who was diagnosed as different, weird, and ADHD to the extreme. Most people would say, Allison doesn't have her in it. It's never going to happen, right?
Yeah, as a kid, I was told, and I was made to feel bad for having an overactive imagination. Well,
yeah, overactive imagination is what almost every child has. But in some cases, the way that imagination comes out can cause adults to scratch their head. So let's go back in time a little bit. Let's talk about your childhood and the difficulties that people had trying to properly diagnose what was going on in your overactive imagination.
so as a kid, I was born with a bowel condition, which made I was in and out of hospital quite a lot in my first sort of 5 or 6 years. And my mum didn't like having a sick kid. She also didn't like having a kid that was constantly on the go, never slept. So my grandma bought me a toy box that had Zebedee from the Magic Roundabout on it. So it was
All
so
right.
fancy. And I was made to feel like I was not a good kid because I talked too much. I fidgeted. I never slept. I was always bouncy. So my mum was always taking me to the doctors, like, what's wrong with her? What's wrong with her?
Yeah. What's wrong with this child? Why isn't she like everybody else, right?
Yeah. And like in the 70s, ADHD and autism in girls was unheard of.
Yeah, it really was.
It was completely unheard of. So I escaped into books. I escaped into stories. It was my escape away from everything. It was my hyper focus. Obviously, as an adult working with now that I do, and I am sort of working with parents with children with autism and ADHD and looking back at my childhood, I'm like, that makes so much sense. My hyper focus was stories. I used to make them up for my sister, to read to her. And, that was my thing to help me manage.
You have an older or a younger sister?
I have a younger sister. She's 4 years younger than me.
So I'm getting this image right now of you playing with your younger sister in the room together, and you're telling her outlandish stories that parallel Guinevere and Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table.
Yes. Yeah, it was really bizarre, actually. She loved the Care Bears. So I used to make up just all different stories. We had some teddies, and I used to just make up all these stories out of nowhere. And I just had this ability to be able to see something, and it just came together in my head.
Yeah. For the people that are not as old as you and I, they don't recognize Care Bears. So you're going to have to describe the Care Bears for just a second. But basically, every time I saw them on TV, they reminded me of the candy gummy bears. And I was like, somebody turned a candy into a television show. Tell everybody what a Care Bear is.
So a Care Bear is a teddy bear, and on the tummy of the Care Bear, it had like a picture which described what they were, and then they used to have this magical thing that sort of came out of their bellies. It was took them off over rainbows and all sorts. It was great. I loved it.
So I got this image right now of you making up, a bunch of Care Bears that didn't really exist before, and them having epic adventures in your
Yes,
sister's room.
definitely. Yes, I loved it. It was, and my nan used to take me to the library, and I would pick out all the books, and I was a sucker for adventure books. So like the Famous Five and Nancy Drew. Loved
Oh,
Nancy Drew.
Nancy Drew, heck yeah.
Yeah, and that was my thing, was adventure,
Uh-huh.
which is what my
You
book's about.
you mentioned a bowel condition. So how far back did that bowel condition start? And you could tell me the medical name, but it's not going to mean anything to me. Can you describe the bowel condition a little bit?
Okay, so when I was little, I was I was taken off of my mum by social services. They accused my mum of feeding me laxatives
Wow.
because I just constantly had upset tummy all the time. I'd lost so much weight,
Uh-huh.
and I was put in with a foster family. And the foster family then obviously realised actually it wasn't my mum feeding me laxatives at all. And then I spent 2 years in and out of Great Ormond Street Hospital in London,
Good gracious.
where I was diagnosed with what was back then was an overactive colon. It's now ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, that kind
Oh,
of.
okay.
So, but
Yeah.
as a child, back in the 70s and 80s, it was an overactive colon.
What age was this when you were in
I
and out of the
was,
hospital?
so I was born with it, but I was 4 when I was in hospital, and I
Oh, that
couldn't
sounds
tolerate
terrifying.
it. I remember there was a nurse there that gave me a teddy bear that I really loved, but it stemmed a lot of my night terrors.
Uh-huh.
It just the most random night terror ever was the fact that if I passed away, I wouldn't be able to go to the toilet anymore. to a 4-year-old, that was quite
Wow. To a
terrifying.
4-year-old, I guess that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Um, it was a terrible time for me. My mum grew up in a Catholic convent boarding school. She didn't do feelings. She didn't do bodily fluids or anything like that. So she didn't like having a sick kid, and
Yeah.
even more so one that was constantly on the toilet.
Right.
And my stepdad made me feel bad about it. So I tried to hide it a lot, but they didn't explain to me that I couldn't tolerate fruit, vegetables, or sugar. So they just restricted me from eating anything.
Oh, man.
And my sister could eat everything and anything. They could eat.
Oh,
Yeah,
that sounds like torture.
it was. So there's me, and apparently I used to steal food. They'd find it under my pillow, and I'd used to go and steal their biscuits and stuff because I was like, I couldn't understand at that age why I wasn't allowed to eat the same food as everybody else. It wasn't explained to me. And because I was a runaway from 14, as soon as I ran away from home, I just started eating everything, as you do. And I didn't understand. And it wasn't until I was pregnant with my son and developed ulcerative colitis, where I was bleeding and I was very, very poorly, that it kind of all fell into place. And I was like, right, that explains a lot.
When did it actually get under control for you?
So it was never under control. I was put on steroids, long-term steroids, which from I ballooned up to 28 stone. I was a mess. I couldn't leave the house, panic attacks. I was convinced like every little thing I was going to die. Even having 3 children, trying to cope with them and their neurodiversity and their disabilities, and trying to cope with myself, it was awful. I would cry from the minute I got up to the minute I went to bed. And it wasn't until I stopped taking the steroids in 2012, I had this massive panic attack that I was going to die. I was going to choke on the tablets if I swallowed them. So I just didn't take them. And slowly I pulled myself up out of the deep, deep hole that I was in. I'd got to the rock bottom point where I was sitting there rocking, thinking, I'm never going to see my children again. They're going to take me away to a mental institute and I'm never going to see my children again.
Oh, you thought you were losing your mind.
I did.
Yeah.
I honestly did. I obviously later with the ADHD and OCD, intrusive thoughts, everything, it kind of was all explained to me. But that was when I hit rock bottom. That was a pivotal point for me. And I'd just been given a book called The Law of Attraction by Michael Lozier. And I read through it, and it was a game changer for me. And it really helped my mindset and helped me get out of the place I was in. And in 2017, my bowel was going to rupture. So I was rushed in for emergency surgery and had an operation to give me a stoma bag. And that changed everything for me, from not
Really?
being able to leave the house for fear of having accidents and not being near a
Yeah.
toilet,
Yeah.
to suddenly having a stoma. And I understand a lot of people hate having them. I've seen a lot over the last sort of 4 or 5 years where people are online going, I hate having it, it's ruined my life. But for me, it saved me.
Yeah. It gave you your life back,
It
right?
did give me my life back, and I am so forever grateful for that.
Um, for the people that are watching you on YouTube right now, and of course those that are listening, they can't tell that you're wheelchair bound.
I am.
But would you describe a little bit about what led to,
Of
being
course.
confined, not necessarily confined, but to being in a wheelchair?
Yeah. So being on the steroids, unfortunately, I was on steroids for 14 years, full dose, and they destroyed my bones. I was diagnosed with arthritis in my knees when I was 32, and then the hips, then bilateral on the spine and my shoulders. But it wasn't until 2015 when I was I'd lost, so I'd come off of the steroids and so I'd gone from 28 stone down to 17 stone.
Which,
So
for the rest of the world that doesn't measure in stone, that is
oh,
a ton of
that is
body
a ton
weight.
of weight. That is a ton of
Yes.
weight. Um, and I lost so much weight, and I was starting to, get out and about again. And then I went for a walk, and I was like, oh, I had a bit of sciatica. They said to me that I had a bit of a slip disc at the base of my spine. And I went for this big walk with my daughter, and she just had a baby, and we were, walking around this big, beautiful park. And I got back and I walked up the stairs, and I was like, oh, that's pinching a little bit. Got into bed, went
Pinching
to
a little
sleep.
bit.
Yeah,
Okay.
pinching a little bit. And I woke up the next morning, turned over and screamed, and I was stuck there for 2 days. I couldn't move. Every time I moved, I had this spasm that went down my left leg that felt like someone was chopping my ankle off. And I got rushed into hospital. It took them 2 canisters of gas and air to get me out of the house into the ambulance. And they did a discectomy at the base of my spine. My spine had ruptured and it had impinged into my spinal cord. And afterwards, I came out of hospital and I was using a walking stick. But what I didn't realize at the time was the rest of the discs were crumbling and my spine was
Oh, man.
collapsing. So I had, we'd been out for a walk and it was raining, and I slipped in a puddle, and it jarred me enough to be like, right, this is painful. And then slowly over the next 2 months, I just couldn't manage to walk. My leg just went completely numb and I fell over. So I have 3 ruptured discs in the base of my spine, and I have 3 ruptured discs in the cervical top of my spine that have created bone spurs that cut into my spinal cord.
Oh,
So it's painful every day. I do get the spasms. It's like having cramp in your legs, but really bad. And obviously I can't stand up.
okay. I was just thinking, I know some incredibly tough people, some very tough men and women that have gone through some significant physical challenges, many of them from the military or from war. But if you were sitting there or thinking about what it feels like to get a Charlie horse in your leg while you're laying in bed, this causes people to roll out of bed, and writhe on the floor like they've just been shot. Or some of the really tough guys that I know, they'll tell me that when they've ruptured a disc in their spine, that it's insanely painful. And everyone I know that has a touch of arthritis or significant arthritis tell me about the pain, and you got it all. So you must be an incredibly strong, and you must be going through an immense pain, but you must be an incredibly strong woman to be able to live with that kind of persistent pain.
Thank you. I'm stubborn.
Stubborn. That's her word, not mine. I said strong. She said stubborn.
I know.
It didn't miss, you didn't, I didn't skip over, or I didn't miss the comment that you said that you ran away at 14. In fact, I have in my notes here that you were kind of on your own as a teenage girl. Can we go back in time a little bit? Let's talk about what home was like that was so bad that you just decided I'll be better off on my own.
So obviously my mum didn't deal with me being sick, and I was being bullied at school, um, severely. So I was skipping school, just because I was just being bullied so badly. Being in and out of hospital so much as a child, you miss a lot of school. So they
Hmm.
all made their own friend circles, and I was kind of the odd one out. I was odd anyway, but I was even
Yeah.
more so the odd one out. And so, because my love of stories, I used to make stories up for people to like me because I thought that was what I needed. And not getting any love at home. My mum and dad had divorced when I was 4. And my dad kept saying I could go and live with him, but my stepmom would then kick me out and I'd end up at my grandparents, or my nan, which was my mum's mum. And my mum and stepdad, he was very strict and abusive, not just to us, to my mum as well. And everything had to be just so. So to be a sick kid that needed that extra support, they couldn't stand having me around, and I was just battered from pillar to post. I wasn't wanted by any of them other than my grandparents and my nan. And then I missed a day of school, and I came home and my mum had got a pair of scissors out of the drawer, and she was waving them at me and said, "Just stab me with them, just stab me with them, because that's what it feels like." And she just lost it. And I was just like, I don't actually need to put up with this anymore. I don't need to be. I have enough to deal with personally without trying to deal with all of I get it. You grew up in a Catholic convent boarding school because, your mum was a single mum in the 50s. She was 40. She was Irish, big Irish family, had a child out of wedlock. It was a big no-no. And my mum was a handful, apparently, which now makes a lot of sense. So she was shipped off to a boarding school, and she was raised by nuns. So I get it. I come from a big Catholic family, and I understand. But on the same token, I go through a lot through myself. It doesn't mean to say I take it out on my children. So I was just like, no, enough's enough. So I kept running away, and the police kept bringing me back because I was underage. And eventually, when I was 16, I stayed away. And I slept in doorways. I squatted in a house and accidentally set it on fire.
I shouldn't laugh about that.
I did. We'd got a pizza because I was with a friend. We'd kind of a friendship, and she was living on the streets as well. And we'd got a pizza, and we'd put a candle on the pizza box, and both fell asleep.
Candle, cardboard pizza box. Of course. Yeah.
Yep. So this house started to go up in flames. We managed to put it out, but I did struggle. I got into some situations that weren't great. I was sexually assaulted when I was 17. And I then tried to commit suicide with some tablets. And I was in hospital and I had my stomach pumped. And they called my grandma, who then called my mum. And I was taken back home. But my stepdad and I just didn't get along. So I stayed with my nan for a little while. And that's where I met my first husband and fell pregnant with my daughter. So I was a tearaway kind of.
Okay. Let's talk about your first daughter. I know that there's a lot of story that I want to get into here, but you had your daughter, you met your first husband, you had your daughter. How old were you?
19.
Okay.
I didn't want to be an unwed mum.
Hmm.
So we got married while I was pregnant. He was abusive, threw me down the stairs when I was pregnant. Wasn't a great guy. Had my daughter, no problems in my pregnancy really, and had her a day late. And by a year and a half, we'd split. He was very promiscuous. So in the end, I said, no, I can't do this anymore. So I went and stayed with my dad and stepmom for a couple of days. And he moved out. He came back, came back with a baseball bat and tried to burn the house down with me in it kind of attitude. But I was strong, and I was like, nope. So I got the council, which was where we were sort of housed at the time, I got them to move me back to Welwyn Garden City, where all my family was. And I did okay. I was a single mum, and I was, I went back to college to do hairdressing. And yeah, I was doing great. And then I met my second husband, and I fell pregnant straight away with my son. And I was 7 weeks pregnant, and I started losing blood. So I got rushed into hospital, and I lost his twin. And I had the what they thought was gastroenteritis, so really bad tummy bug. And then I started losing blood from my bowel, and that's when they officially diagnosed me with ulcerative colitis. So I'd already had the bowel condition, but they diagnosed me with ulcerative colitis. And then I went into labour with him at 22 weeks. So I was rushed back into hospital and was pretty much there the rest of the time, really. I was having steroid injections for him, for his lungs and everything else. And I was on the steroids to stop the bleeding. And it was a really bad time. And I eventually had him at 36 weeks. And then he was really poorly as a baby. He stopped breathing at 6 weeks old and had horrific eczema. He looked like a burns victim. It was awful. It just completely, like, he was just as a toddler scratching himself raw. They were scabbing over because they were infected. So it was a really tough time. And I kept falling pregnant and miscarrying. No idea why. I had 15 miscarriages. And then I fell pregnant.
Hold on just a second. There's somebody driving and they missed that part of it. You need to say that number again.
15.
She had 15 miscarriages.
I did, yes. And I then fell pregnant with I fell pregnant with my daughter Kelly. And at 24 weeks, when I had my scan, there was no heartbeat. So I then had to deliver my baby, who was stillborn. And we buried her, had a funeral. And at the funeral, I was extremely upset and got very drunk and fell pregnant with Paige, who is my daughter, my youngest daughter. And I was having difficulties in the relationship. Obviously, we were going through autism with my son and trying to deal with all of his health conditions and my health conditions, which were getting worse. But I fell pregnant with Paige and everything was going fine. And at 14 weeks pregnant, I got the telltale signs of I was at a funeral with to my then husband's aunt, and I started feeling that usual kind of thing. And I was like, I know what this is. I'm losing blood. So I rushed to the toilet. And Father Michael actually came with me in the ambulance to the hospital. It was in a different county. And they were going to just rush me in and do a DNC, you're miscarrying. And Father Michael said, wait, she has a history of twin pregnancies. Please wait. So they said, okay, we'll keep her in for a week and we'll rescan her. And then a week later, they were like, there's your baby. Her heartbeat's strong. Unfortunately,
Wow.
I did lose a baby. But
So you've had two twins. You've been pregnant with twins twice and lost one of the two and was able to deliver the other?
yeah,
Man, that's incredible. Medically speaking, that's just amazing.
it was at the time.
Given all of your serious health conditions, I'm surprised that you were even able to deliver one child, let alone have three normal, healthy children now.
When I was 26, I fell pregnant again.
Yeah.
And they said it wasn't growing and it could be the same. And I made the decision to terminate my pregnancy, but also asked them to sterilize me at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is the thing, medically, I had this condition, but no one explained to me that even though I was on the pill so that I didn't get pregnant, I had constant upset stomach. So as soon as I was taking it was just coming straight back out again.
Uh-huh.
And nobody explained that to me. So no wonder I was falling pregnant all the time.
That makes sense. Sure.
Yeah. So, and I was just like, please sterilize me. I can't. And I had two really sick kids because Paige was really sick too. And I was like, I can't do it anymore.
Okay. Well, you just started to answer at least my next question. You had a lot of health conditions. Your mother, it sounds like she struggled as a child. What about your children? What challenges are they dealing with?
So I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And
I don't know what that is. Can you describe it or at least explain it a little bit?
Do you know about hypermobility, where people dislocate their joints?
Yeah, well, I do now.
Okay, so hypermobility is where you're double jointed, what I was told as a kid. You can do the whole bendy joints and that kind of
Oh
stuff.
yeah, those people on the TV or at the circus, they make my stomach a little bit upset when I watch how much they can twist and bend.
Yeah, my party trick when I was a kid was putting my legs behind my head. Um, yeah, so Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is hypermobility, but there are various degrees of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. You can have vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and it can be quite complicated. One of the things with hypermobility is that you develop MCAS, which is mast cell activation syndrome. So it means you're allergic to a whole lot of stuff. So my children are all neurodiverse. My eldest is ADHD, my son is autistic and ADHD, and my youngest is autistic. They also all have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. My son has about the bowel condition, the same bowel condition I do. And they are also, my youngest two are atopic, so they have the asthma, the eczema, and all the allergies. My daughter is so allergic to plants and trees that she can't touch raw fruit and vegetables.
Oh man, that's terrible.
So, but I mean, I've got to give them their due. They are amazing adults. They really are. They are thriving. So, they don't let it stop them either.
Well, obviously, you know a thing or two about ADHD. So as you're raising children with ADHD, it doesn't make it easier, but at least it makes it possible for you to have an idea of what they're going through.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
autism, as I understand it, it's a scale of, severe severity. So where are your two children on this autism scale?
So my son, he is high functioning autistic. He is
Uh-huh.
very sensory. He doesn't like being touched. As a child, he had, so like hoodies. Hoodies have the little
Uh-huh.
ties.
Yes.
We used to
Mm-hmm.
have to buy hoodies from the second-hand shops just to cut the ties off so he could suck them. We had one in the car, one in his school bag, one in the
Mm-hmm.
house. And it was very touch with him. We had to have fluffy rugs so he could just lie and stroke the fluffy rugs. And my youngest, she's got auditory processing disorder, which is part of autism. So kind of, it's not a hearing issue. It's what goes in gets scrambled on the way to the brain.
Huh.
So she misses the part of words, the start of words, and she struggles. If you're in a room full of people, she won't be able to hear anyone in particular because it's just a sensory
The
overload.
conversations are too hard to keep up with.
Yes, and the same with the television. If you're watching a TV program and people come in and start talking, she pauses the telly because she can't cope with all of it going on around her. So
Yeah.
it's specifically a focus thing. For Sean, it's difficult because being a hairdresser, he is very black and white. Everything to him, when he was in school, they said, "Oh, here's a story, read it and then rewrite it." And he was like, "Why have I got to rewrite it? You've already written it. Why do I have to rewrite it?"
Yeah,
He just
right. That sounds like extra work.
yeah, he just couldn't understand the principle of rewording and rewriting a story because
Uh-huh.
they'd already written it. So when it came to hairdressing initially, if someone come in and said, "Oh, I want this style or I want this," he'd be like, "No, it'll look crap on you." He's
Awesome. That's the kind of hairdresser that I need. No, that would look terrible. I'm not doing that.
yeah, that was what he was like. It now works to his advantage. He specialises in extensions, hair extensions,
Uh-huh.
and he's just been on the Netflix red carpet with
What? Look at
yeah.
him. Way to go, Sean.
So Lewis Raymond Taylor has just released the Psychopath Life Coach on
Uh-huh.
Netflix, and my son did the hair for his wife and all the women that were at the premiere.
Well, there you go. For everybody who's out there listening, check out those photos and you'll be able to see just how good Sean is.
Definitely.
When they ask him to do some extensions that he thinks is going to look good on them.
Yes. Yeah. And I think with my page, she's very solitary. In school, they just said, "Oh, she's away with the fairies," and then it turned out she couldn't read and write because she was pretending, because it wasn't going in.
Uh-huh.
She wasn't
Yeah.
taking it in. So what do you do with your child that is struggling with reading and writing and hearing issues? You get her to go to drama classes, and she loved it. She loved
All
being
right.
able to be
Yeah.
that and I suppose that the way we found out was because I didn't realise she was lip reading. And
She's lip reading.
she was lip
Really?
reading, yeah. So I think she was 9. And my ex-husband whispered something, and I was like, there's no way she could have heard that. Um, and he said it again, and he didn't say it. She lip read what he'd said. And we were like, how long have you been able to lip read for? And she's like, oh, years. I was like, and you didn't feel the need
Wow.
to tell us?
Yeah.
And she absolutely loved drama so much that she went to college. Initially to start doing acting, she went to performing arts. And then in her second year, she just had a turnaround because actually she enjoyed being behind the camera. So the year the year of lockdown, she qualified as a technical stage theatre manager.
Good for her. Yeah. Your children are now grown, right?
They are,
Their
yes.
ages?
31, 27, and 25.
Okay. Are they close by you? Do you get a chance to spend a lot of time with them?
So my daughter lives here with her wife. They are expecting their first baby, my youngest.
Mm-hmm.
My son is back in Hertfordshire, where we came because we moved from Hertfordshire to Norwich when they were little, but he went back to Hertfordshire. So it's about 100 miles away. And my eldest daughter, she lives about 10 minutes down the road with my 2 grandsons.
Okay. I was trying to figure out the timing. Did you raise the children mainly on your own, or were you married for a good bit of it?
Yeah, so I got together with my second husband in the end of 1995, and we split in 2015.
So your husband was there for part of their childhood.
Most of it until 2015, when Sean was 17 and Paige was 15.
Okay. I'm doing the math out loud for the audience right now to just see you have 3 children. All of them have some special needs.
They
You
did.
obviously have some disabilities. And the idea of raising children as a single mom, your children all have special needs. You have some disabilities. That's overwhelming for most people that are very healthy and don't have, the past that you have. So the fact that you were raising some of them for as a single mom it's a testament to your how much you care for them and how much you're willing to sacrifice for them.
I never wanted to give up on them. Like I always said that I didn't want to be like my mum. And so I always tell my children how much I love them. Always.
Good. Yeah. Okay, so in my notes it says that you have become an NLP life coach. I don't know what that means. Can you describe that?
Neuro-linguistic programming.
Oh, okay. Neurobrain, linguistic words, programming. So what does a life coach,
So,
NLP life coach do?
okay, so it is working on the mindset. I was working with a family this morning who have had a situation where their child has been kicked out of school,
Uh-huh.
and they are focusing so much on the school, the head teacher, what they failed to do. From my perspective, what I do and is different from a counsellor, as a life coach, I say to them, right, okay, for instance, your child's just been diagnosed with a condition. There's nothing we can do to change that. Yes, it sucks. You are allowed to feel all those emotions of guilt, anger, and everything else. But what we need to do now is we need to move forward and show you that there is things you can do. Obviously, if it's, dependent on the diagnosis, but also changing your mindset from negative to positive, because it doesn't, just because your child's been diagnosed doesn't mean to say life's over for them or you. We just need to find ways to manage it and change how you react, because like broken plate, it's broken. There's nothing you can do about it. You can either be angry at the plate forever, or you can say, okay, I need to buy a new plate.
That is a great analogy. Yeah. When people get a diagnosis from a medical diagnosis, I think human nature is for most people's minds to go to worst case scenario, right? Like you have autism. Well, you start to think about that person that can't function at all and around others, or you've been diagnosed with this bowel condition. You start to think about that person that, your standard of living, your way of life is over. Or anybody who hears the word cancer, they don't actually hear the word cancer. They just hear death. And it might be a little bit of treatment, or it might be just some monitoring or some surgery, and you can have a pretty healthy, normal life. But our minds immediately go to the worst case scenario. And it sounds like part of what you do is help people move away from worst case scenario and get to, this is reality. Let's figure out a way to handle reality. Let's don't live in worst case scenario land, which is where most people's minds go to, and they're going to stay there
Yes.
until somebody like you helps them.
And you can say to them, like, with a condition, we can't fix it, not immediately, but we can do things to manage, and we can do
Yeah.
things to make life easier for you. And the way you look at things, it's so difficult, because you're allowed to grieve, absolutely, for that life, especially for a parent of a child with a diagnosis. All of a sudden, the life that you envisioned having that baby has gone out the window.
Yeah.
Okay, it's, you can grieve, allow yourself time to grieve, but don't
Sure.
stay there.
Of course.
Let's think of positive actions that we can move forward to make life bearable, manageable, and just make you feel better about the fact that actually, and this is one of the words I use, there is hope. And that is a big thing for me, the word hope.
Yeah. I am writing this down as you're talking. This is very wise advice from a woman who's obviously gone through some amazing, incredible stuff, and overcome it. It's natural to grieve. In fact, it's
Yes,
actually a healthy thing for you to
it
grieve.
is.
But if you're not careful, you're going to get stuck there. And what you get a chance to do is give people hope so that
Yes.
they don't stay there.
Yeah.
They figure out a way to face the future with hope instead
Yes.
of, grieving the past.
Yeah.
All right. At the beginning of the show, I said, with all of your challenges as a student, with all of the, labels and the disabilities that you had growing up in school, it is fascinating that you would be able to complete a book. So you use a pen name,
I do.
and you just finished the Aurora Chronicles.
Yes.
What caused you to sit down as a grown adult with ADHD, discipline yourself enough to put a book to publish a book? Can you describe why you started the process in the first place?
Yeah. So, as I've said previously, I have a love for books. I have a love for making up stories. And in 2011, I did an English degree via Open University.
Look at you. Way to go.
Thank you. And
Nice.
the one year I absolutely loved was creative writing. And I did all these stories that we had to do, short stories to obviously give in and be marked. And so I had these short stories, and then I'm not quite sure why I decided to. We'd just moved house into a house that was supportive for me being in the wheelchair, downstairs bedroom, downstairs wet room, and everything. And I just decided to send one of my stories in to a publisher's. I randomly picked a publisher and sent this story in. And the first year of lockdown, when we had the glorious weather, we had amazing weather in the March, I got an email from the publisher saying, "Have you considered the offer?" And I was like, "Offer? What offer?" So I said, "I'm so sorry, I don't know what you mean." And they resent me the email. And they were like, "We loved your short story and we'd like to offer you a short story anthology contract." And I was like, "Oh my goodness." And they were like, "We need 5 more pieces of work." So I already had 4 pieces from when I'd done my degree. I'd had the stories sort of sat on my laptop. So I sent them in and I was like, "Oh, I need 1 more." And my friend had just been to Lapland, and she took some amazing photos of the Aurora Borealis, or the Northern Lights. And it just popped into my head, this story of this girl who lived on, I started doing research on all the planets and all the moons that had the Aurora Borealis, because a lot of moons and planets do have the Aurora Borealis. And yeah, I just envisioned this girl on this ice planet, and they use the Aurora Borealis to jump through to different planets. And I was sitting there and I started writing about this girl that was on this ice planet, and there was a prisoner that she helped escape by accident, and she had to jump through the gate onto Earth, into Lapland, and how she had to chase after this. She was a young teenage girl, and she had to meet this very, suspicious guy that was putting these notes under her door, and she had to meet up with him in a museum in the area of Lapland. And she accidentally ran into her brother, who was in the army of, it was called the Aurora Treaty of Wales. And it's how they then go on a journey trying to find this prisoner, and all the bumps and everything along the way. And I sent it in, but it became a story rather than a short story. So they emailed me back saying, we loved Aurora's story, we're going to shelf the short story anthology, and we want to publish the book. And
wow.
yeah.
I'm sure people have told you this. Do you know how many authors, very talented authors, get nothing but rejection after rejection after rejection when they've already written or have mostly written something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And especially, in the last several years, as the publishing industry gets more and more challenging just because of the digital and the audio
KDP,
trends that are happening, it gets harder and harder every day
It
to
does.
get a book in print.
And so many people have read it, and it's not a long book, it's not a big book. It was it was originally meant to be a short story. It just became a little bit longer. And I've already started getting reviews saying, I loved it, couldn't put it down. Where's book 2? I'm in the process of writing book 2.
That you already answered my next question. So book 2 is already in the works.
It is, yes. I'm halfway through writing book 2, but it's a lot longer than book 1.
This book was just released last month, and it was out like in print as well as digitally, right?
It came out as print first, and it wasn't available on digital, but then within a week, all of a sudden it was available on digital everywhere. And I know with Amazon, they obviously choose which ones they want to pick.
Sure.
So all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, it's on Kindle.
Well, I'm mentioning this now. I haven't had a chance to tell you this, but we're going to give away a digital copy of your book at the end of this show to somebody who's connected with us. We're going to buy a copy and send it away to somebody who's part of our unbeatable army, because we just want to support you. But it sounds like this book has already has enough people interested that you're working on book number 2. If we can go back for just a second for the listeners, hopefully you put 2 and 2 together. This little girl who can't sit down in the classroom, is keeping mother awake at night because she cannot focus. She can't, get herself under control, and nobody recognizes that it's just a very severe form of both a medical condition, a bowel condition, as well as your ADHD. And now you've been able to get your life healthy. You've been able to focus, and you've been able to put a book into print. The fact that you were able to even get this thing done itself is impressive. And now working on number 2, I'm sitting there wondering, am I talking to the next J.K. Rowling? Is that what's happening here? Because when you become a billionaire, please don't forget that we had this interview a long time ago, before you ever created the next version of Harry Potter. Because there is some similarities. It sounds like there's a few similarities between you and a certain female British author who's made a couple of $1 billion off of her works.
Yes, I also have a trilogy in the works as well, which is...
You do?
Yeah, that's going to be amazing. That is a good one.
Well, I am convinced that the Northern Lights are all computer generated hoax, and it's entirely made up by the travel industry. And the reason I say that is because my family and I have tried on multiple occasions to go to places where the Aurora Borealis is. And in every case, I've never been able to see the sky, let alone to see the Aurora Borealis, because it's always been covered by clouds. And I mean, day and night for on and on. And I'm like, you know what? At this point, I don't even know that I believe that they're real. I think it's all just tourism, and they've made this thing up. But if you're telling me that they're not only real here on Earth, but there are Aurora Borealis, there are, these lights on other moons and planets, I love the premise behind this story, that you can jump from planet to planet by jumping into them. I think it's awesome. There's a lot of other stuff about your story that I'd like to talk about, but we just don't have time today. So I want to kind of wrap this interview up by talking about the families that you're helping as a coach. Anybody that has the medical challenges that you have, that has kind of some of the upbringing that you've gone through, most of them, to be honest, would just sit around and they would feel sorry for themselves all day long. But you're taking your experiences, Allison, and you're using it to help make a difference in other people's lives. Can you just describe a little bit more about some of the impact you're making in people's lives as a coach? Because ultimately, you've demonstrated that you're unbeatable and you're helping other people now figure out a way to be unbeatable when life has just given them a really hard blow.
Yeah. When I was struggling with my children and trying to research autism back in the mid 90s, I was alone. There was no one out there. I did because I was really good at computers and everything. I researched, and a lot of the research that I did was from America. There was hardly anything in the UK at that time. And I was alone. Nobody wanted to listen to me. The schools were against me.
Hmm.
And I decided that I wanted to help mums who were where I was 30 years ago and be there to support them and let them know that they're not alone. That's one of the main things that comes across from the mums is how lonely they are and how cut off they are and how they feel like they haven't got anyone to turn to because they're not only having to deal with their child that's got neurodiversity or disabilities, but they're then dealing with the logistics of school, child and mental health services. And it can be a very, very lonely journey. And
Oh, yeah,
I
certainly.
wanted to reach out and say, not only are you not alone, but you will get through this. There is hope. You will get through this. Your children, you'll look back and you'll know that, yes, it was such an incredibly hard journey, but you did it. And if I can help them with that, then that is just something that, I just, even if.
Well, there are some people listening right now that are really struggling, maybe not with autism or with, some of the conditions that you've dealt with, but they are struggling and they feel alone. And one of the reasons for this podcast in the first place is to just give them encouragement and help them to get up tomorrow and keep facing the challenges. Don't give up. But obviously, facing challenges when you've got somebody that you can lean on is a world of difference than trying to go through it alone. So, where do you recommend for the person that's listening right now that's going through it and it's really bad, but they're alone? Where do you recommend that they go to get help? How do you got any suggestions on how they can find a coach like you if they live somewhere else in the world?
I've helped, I've got a lot of mums that are in different countries. So I'm not just based in the UK.
All right. Okay.
I do video link calls with people all over the world. So they can absolutely reach out to me. But what I would do is start with is if you are really feeling alone and you are feeling really bad, use social media. Find some groups, look up your condition, look up your child's condition and find some groups. Join the
Okay.
groups and if there isn't a group, make one. And
There you
start
go.
telling people that you've made this group about whatever the condition is or whatever the issue is that you have. But find people, and social media is such a huge platform, and there are so many people out there. And I've made so many friends online that I've not met in person, but we talk every day.
All right.
So I will suggest is the first port of call, obviously besides a doctor and everything, is reach out on social media, find some groups that have got the same things that you are dealing with, or make one yourself and just start saying
Uh-huh.
you've made it, and just reach out to people because there are other people like you too.
Yeah. There's this famous phrase, I think it's said all over the world, or a version of it that says misery loves company. And what that phrase means is when it's really, really bad, if you have somebody that's going through something like you're going through, it makes it a little bit easier to bear, not to know that somebody else is suffering and you're suffering, but to just see if they can do it today, then I can do it today. And tomorrow, if I've got the strength to do it, then maybe they can get through it. And those groups that you're describing are ways where misery can find company and, make it through some hard times together.
definitely.
Allison, I'd love to talk to you some more, but we got to
No
wrap this
problem.
episode up. There's a lot more that I'm sure people would like to know about you. If they want more information about you personally or about your books that you write under the pen name December Rose, how
Yeah.
can they find out more information about you?
I am on TikTok as a SEND mum to mum specialist. I'm on
Okay.
Facebook with the same, Instagram with the same. You can search me by name, obviously Allison Rose-Mannall, or just look up SEND mum to mum specialist and you will find me.
Okay.
Yeah, and obviously look up the Aurora Chronicles on Amazon and I'll be there.
Yeah. Go ahead and buy your first copy on Amazon right now so that when she does become the next J.K. Rowling and you've got a first edition of her book, it'll be
Yes.
worth $1 billion one day. By the way, if you're driving, if you're busy right now, we're going to put a link to her social media profiles in the notes to this episode. So don't worry if you didn't have a chance to write it down. Allison, you've been able to take some of the pain and the problems that you've been through in the past, and you've been able to not only beat them, not only to live a healthy and a full life as a result of it, but you're now using what you've been through to help other people live a full life. And I just want to say thank you for the impact that you're making on people around the world.
Thank you.
And thanks for being on the show with me.
It's been a pleasure.
I love the way that she worded this. It's natural to struggle. It's okay to grieve when you've just been given a diagnosis or you've just gone through something very, very difficult. We all need to grieve. But Allison helps people make sure that they don't stay there. And she's making a big difference in other people's lives. I hope that you were motivated because of her story. I hope that you were encouraged to say, if this woman can go through 15 miscarriages and still be able to deliver a healthy baby, then I can handle my medical problems. If she can go through the problems of moving out and being treated like she wasn't wanted, then you can handle the relationship challenges that you're going through. Allison, thank you for sharing your unbeatable story with us on this episode. And guys, we've got other incredible, unbeatable stories coming up. So if you just found this podcast for the first time, why don't you go ahead and subscribe on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform? You know, we also stay connected on social media. We're out there delivering content all week long. And if you want to find us on social media, why don't you just go ahead and search at Unbeatable Podcast and you'll find us out there on social media. You're also going to find some amazing people out there on social media, like our fan of the week this week, Timothy Boulay. Timothy, thank you for the way that you're engaged with other people on our social media channels. And I just mentioned it during the middle of this episode, but we're going to give away a free copy of Allison's book, The Aurora Chronicles, to somebody who's part of the Unbeatable Army. That's our email list. It's totally free. We're not going to blow up your inbox. We're just going to send you some relevant content once or two times a week. And if you want to be part of this, if you want to be considered eligible for a free copy of Allison's book, just go over to unbeatablearmy.com. Thank you for joining me for this episode. I hope it's encouraged you. I hope it's helped you get through something difficult today. And I'll see you right back here for next week's episode. God bless.
These stories of triumph over adversity will help you handle your toughest days in life and become unbeatable.